It's so good to have you back on the AM show. Well, let's get into the newspaper review. We're joined by Kwadwo Poku. He is an energy analyst. I'll be getting connected with him shortly. But, of course, this segment always brought to us by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, and they say the end to chronic disease. I'll tell you why shortly. Now, they're offering free services in these two categories, and you must take advantage of it. If you're a man, have you ever checked your prostate? Do you know what role your prostate plays? It's part of the reproductive system. Without it, you could live. You would likely live if it weren't maybe malignant and hadn't given you cancer or something of the sort, but with some consequences. You don't want to get there, which is why you ought to take preventive measures. What food you eat, what activities you engage in, what checks you run. You can check your prostate at Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic for free. If you're a woman, do you know your level of fertility? Do you know about the other surrounding issues that impact your fertility? You could have fibroids and you wouldn't know it, and that could impact your fertility. For you as well, you can get fertility screening for free at Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. Now, guess what? They're dotted across the length and breadth of the country, making it easier for you to reach to them. So if you're here in Accra, all you have to do is go to Spintex opposite the Shell signboard. If you're in Kumasi, Krunumabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex. If you are in Takra, the Anaje Estates is where you can locate them. If we come back to the Greater Accra region, Tema, they are in Community 22. Then there's Techiman Hanswa and Esiama in Zima. I'm sure I've whetted your appetite enough. Call them on these numbers: 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease, but just the commencement of our news review. Now we're out with our latest edition, the latest installment of A Nation That Begs. This second part is called From Hero to Zero. I'm putting it to all of you out there watching me this morning. Ghana started so well. Even before the colonialists, the imperialists came here, from the Portuguese to the Dutch, the Dutch, I should say, to all the others who came here, to the British, we had it all. And one thing that gets me thinking, even when we were mining, engaging in exploitation of resources, we did it in a certain way. Some would say, oh, now we have all this technology and equipment and all of that, which is why maybe we are seeing galamsey and all of that. But there was responsible mining back then. We still had the gold and all those resources, but our forefathers were more conscious of what they did to the environment. Look at us today. But even beyond that, we were colonized. We went through that phase. At the point when we gained independence, we had not so much, because some lies have been told about what Kitty, the Osajafo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah had. We didn't have that much. He had to work to get it. That was how we got the Akosombo Dam. It was through his ingenuity that we got the Tema motorway. That is how we started Tema. But we had quite a bit, comparatively. That's why we were able to help countries like Guinea. Okay, we were pushing for the liberation of the African continent, Osajafo and his CPP back then, across the continent. That was how he was able to do that. Some would later claim that he had expended resources he could have used in Ghana, trying to engage in becoming the leader of Africa. But the point is, like he said, without independence for the rest of the African continent, our independence would be meaningless. Comparatively at the time, we rubbed shoulders with India. India, look at the disparity. It's like night and day when you consider India and where they are technologically. Well, population-wise, they've always been big. Economy, one of the biggest in the world now. Look at us. Yet comparatively at the time, we could rub shoulders with them on certain fronts. Malaysia and others, South Korea. Yet look at where they progressed to and where we have tapered off at. So today, I want to get your feel of why we are where we are Why are we where we are, especially economically speaking? Former President Mahama said after his IMF deal, we would never go back to the IMF. Well, I guess he was supposing he would remain in power and that situation would stabilize. Who knows what would have happened? But at least we know that the entity that took over from him, the NPP, that told us they were going to move us from taxation to production, and in very recent times that we would never go to the IMF because we're a proud people and blah, blah, blah. Here we are with the IMF one more time. What do you think? I want us to start the conversation from here. So you shoot me a message. Let me know what you think about why we keep ending up here. The UK, the British, sometime in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, ended up with an IMF program. And they said, like the Spaniards would say, nunca jamás, never again. And they stuck to it. One experience was enough. We've been there 17 times. What is wrong with us? We have to have these conversations in our homes, in our schools, wherever, because the misleadership, whether it's the NDC or the NPP, impacts you and me. Food for thought. You can share your thoughts with me via the live stream. And when we get into the hard issues with our guests, be sure to call after that so we know what you're thinking. But let me welcome aboard Kwadwo Poku. A very good morning to you, sir. Well, it appears Kwadwo still hasn't made tracks in terms of joining us. So we'll start on the business front this morning. The graphic business says Ghana's IMF program implementation, businesses and households to feel the heat. And how? Well, businesses and households would bear the brunt when the government begins full implementation of the conditionalities of the IMF extended credit facility, an economic expert has cautioned. He said, though the adjustments and policy initiatives were good and would help the country to return to a growth path, the austerity measures in the program would hurt individuals and businesses. Disclosing this to the graphic business in an exclusive interview, a professor of economics and finance at, I thought it would be on the next page, but it's all the way on page 20. Let me quickly get that. So why has the story been mixed up? Graphic business. Looks like the story is all jumbled up. Okay, so I think it actually starts from page 6 before it goes back. Yes. So it indicates it's on page 6, but there's a continuation from page 20 as well. University of Ghana Professor Godfred Bokpin said the targeting implementation of the government's program was poorly done. Just to quote him, he says, if we cut capital expenditure, it will affect growth because, for instance, we wouldn't be able to build roads. And looking at the bad nature of our roads, that would be a disincentive. Contractors would also not have money to pay their employees and suppliers, so it would have an impact, he explained. Again, he said the government's plan to reduce transfers to statutory funds under the ECF would also contribute to the impending economic hardship on individuals and households as well as businesses. He also talks about the public sector. He says we would not be able to recruit into the public sector as much as we could when we were on our own, and one key adjustment would be wage freezes. And when that happens, it means the increments in wages would not happen significantly because the government wants to make savings. So businesses, it's not that they will feel the heat. They are feeling the heat. We get them talk to us all the time. The Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and all of that, the AGI, among others. The people on the street, Abasokai and others, they're all up in arms because this is not the best time to go for a bank loan. I'm not trying to, sabotage any bank, but we all know it. People are fleeing because guess what? The conditions are not exactly the best. People will still go, and I'm not saying it's the worst possible situation, but in these economic times, and with the banks trying to avoid bad debts, okay? I know a few things that I cannot say on air, but with the banks trying to avoid bad debts, with the economic situation, with the policy rate, and everything else. People on facilities, variable facilities. I know people who used to take a chunk of their salary to pay for their monthly facility requirements. Now, the entirety of their salary is not enough to meet it. And so that will be taken once it hits their account, and then they must now find money to top up. So if you're a business person and you've fallen into such a pit, what do you think that would mean? For households as well, we've seen inflation spike again. Now, some may say that it is decelerating, but it is decelerating at a slower rate. We hit over 50%. It has fallen to around 42 point something percent. But that is another increment because in recent times, month on month, it went up by a little. With all of these dynamics, we cannot avoid the fact that we are feeling the heat. So the finance minister will say, our credit books look better. Our balance looks better. Our credit sheet as a country may look a bit better in terms of what we can afford to do with what we have within a certain spate of months. But the reality is that we have a long way out of this hole. How we'll get out, only God knows. And that question again about the continuous stay of Ken Ofori-Atta at post. I've become a bit indifferent to it because even the members of parliament on the majority side who at a point started a drive chickened out. Yeah, I said it. They chickened out. So it is what it is. Is it a means to an end? You started a process. Mr. President, though, promised that after securing the deal, Ken Ofori-Atta would make tracks. He's still at post. So what does this mean for respect for the people, for sticking to one's word, and for ensuring that the economy is stable? Because guess what? Who mans the economy also comes with a certain baggage or positive effect. Why do you think his name just escapes me? I'll try to remember. The Ghanaian, the British Ghanaian who became Exchequer, finance minister, if you like, in the UK. Why do you think he got ousted? There was so much pressure, his own prime minister had to say goodbye to him. It appears here we don't have that policy of fire and hire. I hired you. You are not meeting the requirements. You simply are not on top of the job. I fire you. We don't have that culture here. Oh, he helped during the campaign. Oh, this person did that. Oh, family members. Let's get into other dynamics now. And NPRA seeks support from development partners. Now, external debt negotiations. Experts worried about slow pace. Minister confident of deal soon. Let me go back there, talk more about the economy. Of course, the graphic business focuses on that. Economists and experts have raised issues over what they describe as the slow speed of the country's external debt negotiations. They believe this could derail the objectives of the 3-year extended credit facility program with the IMF. Now, the government is targeting an external debt relief of $10.5 billion between 2023 and 2026 as it engages its external creditors for debt restructuring. The external creditors include both bilateral and commercial creditors. The government announced the suspension of debt service on external commercial obligations on December 19, 2022, and has since then been engaging with them on a debt restructuring. The government is also seeking to restructure debts totaling $14 billion, out of which $13 billion are in bonds with external commercial creditors. Now, in an interview with the graphic business on the sidelines of the Institute of Fiscal Studies Assessment of the IMF program, Senior Research Fellow Dr. Said Bwachi said the restructuring of the external debt component of the country's debt had not been given the urgency it deserved. Quoting him, he says, "As we stated in our review of the 2023 budget statement and the debt restructuring program, given that the external debt component has serious exchange rate implications, the main trigger of the current macroeconomic instability, we expected the government and its partners to pay greater attention to the external debt. It is clearly visible from the approved program that the external debt restructuring is critical in helping the country meet its large fiscal and external financing needs." And these are some of the matters we're talking about. Kwadwo Poku, an energy analyst and a man of many things, joins the conversation. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing well. Let's get into the matters, weighty matters I have raised already. Ghana's IMF program implementation, businesses and households to feel the heat. They are feeling the heat already. That is Professor Godfred Bokpin, lecturer at the University of Ghana. And I just read the story about the external debt negotiations and how, according to senior research fellow Dr. Said Boache, he says, and he is with the Institute of Fiscal Studies, he says we're going at a very slow pace and this is impacting the economy. Any quick thoughts on these two matters?
Yes, we've always known that the external debt is the bigger chunk of our debt. And that is the one that we service by having to change cities into FX. As a result, it has always been a problem because you remember when the city now took a nosedive, it was because we were now buying a lot of FX to be able to service the interest on our loans. Unless we are able to have a concrete restructure of that debt, we are still not out of the woods yet. Remember when we spoke last week, I was a bit furious when some government officials went to the UK and said that we are back on track, when clearly you have just entered the IMF and you have not even finished with the restructuring of the external debt. Look, will you go and borrow money from somebody in good faith? And these international bond markets, they are people whose money they've invested. So you go and take investors' money. And because you mismanage your situation, you want to go back and restructure the yields of those investors. They don't take kindly to those things. So when you say you are back, and don't think that you'll be back in that market for investors to now have confidence to give you back money anytime soon. So look, to have a comprehensive restructure of that external debt is very important because it will give clarity to what we now have to pay, how much we have to pay, and when that payment is due. As we speak now, we've defaulted since, I think, November last year, and I don't know when we're going to start servicing our external debt. And these are concerns for investors whose money are stuck in these bonds. Funny enough, I thought that only external people invested in some of these bonds, but there are local businessmen who also invested in some of these external bonds. So it's also affecting the local businesses and the business environment. There is no money. Me and you have spoke various times about squeezing water from a rock. That's the situation that we have now. The non-oil proceeds, which the IMF document is very heavy on. You know, for me, I would have thought that they would have concentrated heavily on the energy sector, and I've seen the finance minister putting something out there that they are going to restructure and try to concentrate to bring us back from where we are by revamping the energy sector. The upstream, which is the reason we got ourselves into this problem, the oil find, which we have promised Ghanaians will transform this country from what we were in 2006, 2007, to the greater heights 10 years down the line. It's been almost 15 years, and we are still where we were before we found oil. Okay, so we need to pay attention to the energy sector, especially upstream, increase our volumes in the upstream. Today, we are still doing 120,000 barrels a day, where we should have been somewhere around 400,000 barrels a day, 10 years or 12 years into first oil. But we are not. To keep piling on taxes on the average citizen is not the way to get ourselves out of the economy that we have. But unfortunately, that seems to be the way forward now.
Well, you were talking about when we started our default. That was on December 19, 2022. So it was in December last year in terms of not meeting our external debt service obligations. But do you agree substantially that businesses and households are feeling the heat on the back of the economic dynamics? And what would you like to see moving forward in the next few months before the next batch or tranche of the IMF money comes through? Briefly on that, what would you like to see?
Well, the best way forward is to give some reliefs and reduce the taxes, but we've done the opposite. Well, like I said, the IMF program is heavy on non-tax receivables, sorry, non-oil receivables. And when you look at non-oil receivables, taxation is the only option that we have on non-oil receivables. Okay, so what I wanted to get, look, we've coming out of the pandemic. We've coming out of a recession around the world, sort of, where because of the Ukraine-Russia war. So look, we're really at the bottom. What we need is to grow wealth in the economy. The only way to grow wealth is to basically reduce taxes. But we are doing the opposite. We are really piling on taxes, and I don't know where we want the growth to come from. Because the only way we can grow is if the industry grows, if the citizenry have purchasing power to buy more. And that's the only way the economy will grow. But for you to be taxing more when you've not increased salaries, you've not increased the what is the disposable income of the individuals. That means they buy less, industry feels the pinch because they are not producing more. As a result, you don't grow the economy.
Well, let's get into some other stories very quickly from the graphic business. World Bank June Food Security Update, that is on pages 4 and 21. It's an interesting update, and if you look at the real food inflation heat map and you look at the food inflation heat map, you would see where the world is, where Africa lies, and how the situation really looks. You can get the charts from there. It's something that you would find rather interesting. But let me get into some of these other stories. And then there's also that editorial, Ghana's program with the IMF and its impact on you, something else that you should be checking out. On page 8, business resilience strategies for the second half of 2023. There's also this bit on corporate governance and ethics on page 10. Now, let's go to the back page. Why corporate sponsorship is vital for the growth of sport. And corporate sponsorship is a form of support non-profits receive from corporations for an event or a project. The benefits are twofold. Non-profits receive the help they need to continue serving their missions, while the company receives tax deductions and a positive boost or mileage. In sports sponsorship, $50 million a year can quickly cross the table for big clubs such as FC Barcelona or athletes like LeBron James. The European Football Championship also showed that an investment like that of TikTok, Booking.com and co. can be worthwhile because sport not only receives a lot of attention from an entertainment point of view, but also has an enormous social relevance. I just wanted to bring this up to cap off the graphic business. Why? I'm sure you've heard that Mediama, which won the Ghana Premier League, the male Ghana Premier League, got 300,000 Ghana cedis, about, is it $26,000 or $30,000 thereabouts, the equivalent of about 300,000 Ghana cedis. And of course, there has been talk about the sums that the GFA got from those who sponsored the Ghana Premier League, sponsored the entirety of the year, and whether it was fitting what we were giving out. But what do you make of our sports in terms of sponsorship? When the GNPC has gone into sponsoring the Black Stars, we have criticized them. Apt? What is your take?
Well, look, we have not grown wealth in the country. And if you don't have wealth in the country, things like corporate social responsibility suffers. And when you look at sponsorship, it would in a way come under corporate social responsibility. The sports for me in Ghana, we've just gone from high to a very low. I've always told you that I'm a House of Folk fan. And not only am I a House of Folk fan, I was a die-hard phobia. I would drive from Accra to Kumasi when Kotoko is playing Haas, or when Haas is playing in Kumasi, or I'll go to the stadium in Accra when Haas is playing anything. I don't even know that one player in Haas today. And the point where, for me, I went off was when Haas now won. Remember when we won the league and we went on to win the African Cup. And
right.
We were given $1 million. Yes, we were given $1 million at the time. And that time it was the man who owns Bus Stop. What's his name? The chairman of the club was our good friend who owns Bus Stop. I can't
Harry
remember the name
Zakor.
now. Harry Zakor, yes. And when we later found out the salaries of these players, you know what? I said, I can't give that emotion to football when the players who are playing are paid these paltry sums. Okay? Because it's not fair. And that is why today, the new slave trade, the new human trade is sports agents. That's the new slave trade. Because if you're looking at players in Ghana whose team has won and they are getting $26,000, how much bonuses do you think they will get? So it basically diminished the whole football thing in Ghana. But it has a very big potential, huge potential, okay? But individuals have just made themselves that is where they are also going to butter their bread. As you rightfully said, GFA must have gotten more money. What they used it for, I don't know. Now, you now find out that the club and the players who entertain me and you are getting the short end of the stick, which is unfair. The reason corporates are not sponsoring is because the viewership, the likability, the eyeball has gone down. Every corporate sponsor would want to be part of something big. You don't have to tell a corporate sponsor where to put their money. They will chase you for it. Okay? So if the football environment was driving the thousands of supporters to the stadium like it was in the past, corporate sponsorship will follow automatically. The TV rights will follow automatically because it will be a big deal. You don't need corporate sponsorship when the league and all the football has diminished. You should see some of our pitches. National Sports Council, non-existent. Okay? So, in fact, the fundamental basis of this thing is wrong. Because when you see some of the parts where some of these players play, it's not fit for telecasting. How are you going to show on DSTV some of the pitches that we have in Ghana where we play our league? It's disgusting. Okay, so we need to invest, and I think it starts from the Sports Council. Government should stop giving money to GFA. Okay, government should put money in the National Sports Council to develop the facilities for the football to be played. So the stadiums, we've all seen the stadia in Takoradi and the state is in today. Why have we put so much money in that stadia and it is left to rot the way it is being kept? So government should stop giving money to GFA, invest in National Sports Council to develop the facilities, and let's have good state-of-the-art stadia for these supporters to go and support their team, and let's bring up the team from that level. Let GFA fund for itself, because after all, it's a private organization. It's not a government organization.
Thanks for those thoughts. There are some comments coming through. I'll just share them briefly. So initially, I started the conversation when I was talking about the economy and how far we had come. Today, I'm sure you know, we're looking at the second installment of A Nation That Begs. This one we've captioned Hero to Zero. I was talking about where we had come from, the good stock we had come from, the promise we had at independence, and how it has all crumbled downhill. So some comments are coming through on the pain of missing out on them. Let me just take a few. Aaron Kokomisa says, the truth is only one. It is rather unfortunate that we are supposed to behave as if all was well or all were well, but it is not. Most citizens cannot afford to buy fruits to eat because of the price. Even the price of an avocado is 5 Ghana cedis. Do you know, recently, yes, you tried to get an avocado and some are as high as 15, 20 cedis. Kwadwo, can you imagine that?
I don't buy. No, my brother, I don't buy. You see, that's the thing. It's a perishable good. So if I don't buy, it will spoil. So leave it NEMPRO. Because I don't get that.
No, but how about those who are selling them? You can't say that leave it NEMPRO. How about those who are selling them?
Selling avocado for 15 cedis. How's that? Meanwhile, when it's in season, it's 3 for 5 cedis. So I don't buy. Look, avocado for me now is a luxury. When it's 3 for 5 cedis, I'll buy. If it's 1 for 15 cedis, I'll just eat my plantain or my yam like that. I don't even bother.
By the way, on that day, I went past. It was a filing past. I went past and I didn't buy. Because, Charlie, if you... Right now, the budget is really tight.
It doesn't make sense. Because he or she only went around the corner and plucked them from the house next door. And then sit on the side of the road and tell you, oh, dollar cost. Dollar, no.
But that's not fair, Kwadwo. if you say she went to the house next door, and even the person next door would probably sell it to her. So let's look at that. But the person is saying the government must find a better alternative to beat down prices of seasonal farm products to make it affordable for all. This one also says, Ben, you talk of development, yet you are unable to tell your listeners to pay taxes. Can you tell us the total numbers of Ghanaians who pay taxes and the rate at which communities are expanding, which need roads, hospitals, schools, with respect to this part of your messages, but that you do your listeners good by being fair? Thanks. Dennis Duku sent that. I had to just get back to you. Dennis, have you paid attention to the component of our taxes? Maybe you're not in this country. We have many more taxes. We're talking about nuisance taxes. In fact, are you aware that there's a 35% tax, importation levy, importation tax, and then VAT on sanitary products? I'm talking about pads, sanitary pads for women. Are you aware of that? It's considered a luxury, but is it a luxury? You're still paying for the COVID-19 levy also. Yeah. Why?
Yeah, but you see,
so if you talk about taxes, I agree with you to a certain extent, but it is that we are overtaxing those who are being taxed instead of expanding the net to the point where every Tom, Dick, and Harry, every Kwame, Kojo, Mansa is paying the tax so that not too many people are feeling the heat. It is said that if more people hold the sky, too many people will not feel shoulder pain or backache. So that is the point. So if you tell me that education on paying taxes, people are paying taxes. We're paying through the nose. Don't come and tell me about taxes. Kojo.
Ben, I think the education is that people have to understand direct and indirect taxes. Okay, maybe look, less people pay direct taxes, but everybody in Ghana pays
indirect taxes. In fact, when you purchase credits, you are paying indirect taxes. Everything.
Look, if you don't come out of your house and you put on electricity, you are paying indirect taxes. If everybody pays indirect taxes, so that one is the education we need to give. That is the direct taxes that we need. When you said widen the tax net, is widen the tax net for the direct taxes. But everybody pays the indirect taxes. But there's plenty today. When you go to restaurant to eat, and look at the bottom part.
I say, when you pass by any of these eateries, when you are done, if you don't want palpitations of your heart, don't look at the bill, the pace, the slip. Because if you do, and then you calculate the portion in taxes, Masa, Dennis Duku, don't even start this conversation. I'm sure you don't even want to go there. Trust me. This person got me riled up this morning. Like, seriously? Anyway, let's get into other stories.
It's education we need to give.
Daily Guide. I aborted Sarkodie's baby, Yvonne Nelson. I am not Yvonne Nelson, that book. Am I Benjamin Akakpo? Yes, I am. As for me, I am. She says she's not Yvonne Nelson. But some revelations. Peter Lajete is in there. Her father, so to speak. Sarkodie, Inyanya, the Nigerian artist. So many things happening. I don't know. Did you get a whiff of that book?
I won't read it.
I'm not saying. I've just followed excerpts of it because it's my work. It's out there. But
I don't do tabloid. I won't read tabloid. I'm too much of a serious person to read tabloid. I don't read tabloid.
Are you suggesting Yvonne Nelson is unserious?
I'm not saying she's unserious. I said I don't read tabloid. It's not her person I'm talking about. It's the information that's being put out there for me is tabloid, and I don't read tabloid news. All
right. NPP's Akoto polls Billboard crowd. Let's invest in Afrexim Bank, Kwadwo said so. And AG rejects Actor Forcing payment plan. Let's get into those two. So, New Patriotic Party flag bearer aspirant Dr. Usu Akoto has justified the small throng that accompanied him to file his nomination papers, claiming that he only garnered a dedicated crowd of believers in his bid. According to him, he is not intimidated by the massive crowds that have characterized the filing of nomination papers by other contestants. All right, let's just wrap from here with this story. I've noticed, however, that the Daily Guide newspaper has been very heavy on a certain personality, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, who is also aspiring to be flag bearer of the party. Maybe it is just me, but I've noticed the likes of, there's another paper that also has been pretty heavy over time. I don't know what the rest of you are doing And it appears,
it's a private
but anyway,
newspaper.
maybe you can share your thoughts on that, and then the small crowd, so to speak, that Dr. Free Akoto
Okay, so
pulled.
look, it's a private newspaper. Okay, it's a private newspaper. And
I get that. I'm not disputing it.
Well, so if they are paid newspaper. So when you pay them, they would now be heavy on you. They basically have to generate revenue to run the paper. So whoever is paying is the one getting the mention on the front page. So that's what everybody should think about. You see, we tend to look at newspapers as if newspapers are out there to basically serve the public good. They are there to serve their pockets. That's what the private newspapers, and I'm sure all newspapers.
And it's crucial you make mention of that, because these private ones, that's exactly what they are doing. That's why you would expect some balance from the Daily Graphics and the Ghanaian Times and the rest. But for the others,
but they are not. They won't do that. So for me, and again on the small crowd, look, Poku will probably end up going there with like 2 or 3 people to submit my forms. If anybody think that because I went with 2 or 3 people to submit my forms, I don't have anybody across the country, so be it. You know, I honestly think that it's a bit disgusting when people are basically doing some shenanigans. You have a situation where people are accorded opportunity to now have a massive, vast people from across the country to come in to show what? At the end of the day, you are popular within the grassroots of the party. You are not, you are not. And those that are trying too hard to show these crowds are the ones that, for me, you can tell there's question mark on certain things. Okay, Dr. Free Akoto went with a few people, chairman of the party. Why not? Like I said, for me, I will probably go with a few people and just submit my form. I don't need to bash people from all across the country.
When are you doing that?
Look, I was supposed to do that this morning, but I'm told that the party executives are not around. They are going to ascend north. I'm going to touch base with them again this morning because I saw a missed call on my phone last night. So I don't know whether there's been a change of schedule, but everything is ready. All my forms, all my documents are ready. I just need them to be there and I'll submit my forms. So if they are there this morning, I'll just go with a few crowd of people, my secretary and a few people to just go and submit. The crowd thing for me is just not necessary.
Okay. Let's wrap the conversation this morning as we look at the Finder newspaper, and then I'll get into the Hawk newspaper as well. Boakye Agyarko files form wants aspirants violating rules punished. That story is on page 9. $6 billion bank inadequate to finance growth. President Akufo-Addo rallies support for Afrexim Bank. And then the Hawk newspaper, importers tell OSP, tax collection is not your job. So let me just wrap with this. You would have less than a minute to respond, but let me just get into it, and then we'll be out of here. So flag bearer hopeful of the NPP, Boakye Agyarko, has urged the party to take action against candidates in the flag bearership race who are disregarding the electoral rules. He emphasized the importance of upholding the rules and regulations for a fair and transparent electoral process. He says it is important that all candidates uphold the rules and regulations without sounding like a fly in the jar. There have been many provocations. There have been many breaking the rules for which no sanctions have been applied. I have even raised the matter at the National Council. How do you feel about that? And there's also this talk about the OSP on page 9. The Importers and Exporters Association of Ghana has declined the Office of Special Prosecutor's request to access the ICOMS platforms used at the ports. According to the association, the ICOMS platform contains sensitive data of importers, exporters, and business operators, and they fear that any mishandling or breaches of the data could negatively impact the business community. You have some 40 seconds to share your thoughts.
Basically, look, again, a good sword should cut both ways.
Right.
So the party hierarchy and the national executive of the party should make sure that what applies to Kofi is what is good for the geese is good for the gander. Let's apply the rules evenly. For me, what the call Mr. Agyarko is making is well. We should make sure that we stick to the rules. And if somebody violates it, doesn't matter who it is, the person is punished accordingly. If there is any such sanctions prescribed in our constitution, the bit about the documentation. Look, if it's sensitive information, it's sensitive information. I think the Right to Information Act, if that's what the person is going through, had some exemptions on which documents you can access and what information you can access. But Ben, I wanted us to touch a little bit on this GMPC saga. It's unfortunate we didn't start early.
We have very limited time, so you have to round up on that quickly, please.
Well, yes, I think the public should. There's been a lot of voodoo mathematics and calculation being put out there by a section of the the civil society organization which I'm a part of. And to me, I think that it's unfair for anybody to suggest that as a refinery sitting there like Tema Oil refinery, somebody can go in there and make $700 million a year. If you can make $700 million a year for Tema Oil refinery, we will not be in the IMF. So please, I think we should just disregard those voodoo calculations being perpetrated on Twitter and in some parts of the media.
Okay. And Safwa, Poku, Kwadwo, I wish you the best of the day, and we look forward to when you'll be filing your forms. Kwadwo Poku is an energy analyst.
I will give you a ding if I decide to do it today.
All right. Thank you very much. This segment brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. They're offering free prostate screening, free female fertility screening. Locate them here in Accra at Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard. Kumasi Krodum here, behind the Angel Educational Complex. Takrady Anaji State, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswe and Siama Nzema. If you'd like to call them, which I prefer you do, reach them on 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. Sports is up next with the latest on that terrain. Do stay.